and we'll continue our whistle tour of a different part of the ecosystem. And this time, very happy to invite Declan Pettit, the co-founder and director of MCP Insight, talking about the VAS and DCB Landscape. Declan, please come in.
Good morning, everybody, here and online. I'm going to cover off very briefly on fraud in the advertising channel, so specifically from the banner through to the landing page. I don't have a long time, so I'm just going to go straight into it. I'm going to firstly just cover off on some definitions because there is some confusion there. Then I'll give you an idea of some statistics that we have gathered over the last couple of years. Then I'll look at some examples, depending on what time we've got left, and then some solutions. So, there are three types of fraud in the advertising channel. The first one, and I'm not going to spend long on this, is perpetrated against the advertiser themselves, as opposed to the user. So mechanics like ad stacking, click bots, click hijacking, and click spamming. The main aim for the fraudster, or generally the rogue affiliate, is to inflate or falsify the number of clicks generated in order to create more money for themselves illegally. In other words, just giving the illusion of better performance than they're actually doing. The second one of two, where the fraud is perpetrated directly to the user themselves. The first one is what we term consumer manipulation.
I think this might be better.
Thank you. Both hands full, great. And so examples would include content locking. So that would be where a user is browsing a site, they get stuck on a page, and they can't move away from that page unless they click their way out of it, which normally they're clicking a button which subscribes them, or where they're actually having to pay for something as a result. There are many types of misleading ads. A couple of examples here would be the obvious one where free is plastered all over the pre-landing pages. But of course, it doesn't end up being free. They will pay, unbeknownst to themselves. And passing off, which is effectively using a large, well-known brand without permission in order to appease any concern the user might have that they're in a safe environment. And then it goes from there. Unwanted redirects, that's where a user thinks they're clicking through to look at a service that they're interested in, but actually they're taken to an unintended page, and then the fraud will occur after that. Hidden charges, subscription, there's no mention, there isn't even any mention of the word free. There's no mention of any charges whatsoever, but invariably when they click through, they will be charged. Confusing, unclear information, that's self-explanatory. It's just a whole load of information and text put on the page to confuse. And then the non-compliant ads, again, a very, very big silo, which, an example of which would be creating false urgency. So there's a clock or there's a limited offer, which is not actually applicable. The third one, probably the most serious one, is where there are payment attempts in the actual ad channel itself. The first example, bots. There are many, many, but generally the principle is that they're trying to mimic human behavior and to interact with or fool the payment platform. Clickjacking, where there is an individual, there is a proper user who's on the page, but there are overlaying pages and messages which lead them to believe that they're going through to something, whereas in fact something else is happening below, invariably an attempt to build their phone. JS script code ingestion, that's effectively where the whole journey is being taken out of their control, and an automated bot is running the journey right through to the attempted bill. APK fraud we'll come back to later, actually, because that's quite interesting. And then there are other spoofing, smishing. Effectively, smishing is where the Dimitri mentioned it earlier, where you've got the text going out mimicking another service, where in effect you're taken through to the normal set of pages where you will again be invariably billed. Just moving on to some stats. This is based upon MCP's scanner tool. We're live in about 35 geos. And our regions that we focus on are mainly Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So hence the stats here reflect that based on the individual countries. We're moving into Latin America, and whilst we do have a strong presence in Asia, it is predominantly our anti-fraud tool as opposed to our scanner tool, and this is the one that monitors what's going in the ad environment from the initial banner. We can see this period, which is over 2022 and to date 2023, you can see Saudi Arabia, which it coincides that they actually launched their services. All the carriers at the beginning of 20 had a big appetite for helping the content providers start promoting with fairly relaxed payment mechanics. And as a result, the fraudsters all pile in. Similar enough story with Iraq, and then moving down to South Africa, and so on and so forth. These are the fraud types, and I just want to really draw your attention to the majority are misleading of some sort, but the top one, the nature of advertising, is effectively where on the banner, you're initially presented with something where you have an interest in that service and you click through, and then it moves to a totally new offer and continues through on that basis. That's what we call natured advertising. Misleading is where it says, the initial ad will take you through to a page which focuses on that service, but there's a lot of misleading information in there. And so it goes down with variations of trying to manipulate the user or trying to mislead them. This is the payment fraud statistic, where, again, same period, and we can see a massive increase in APK fraud. So that's in-app advertising and fraud being perpetrated in that environment. And interestingly, you can see second quarter of 2020, the third quarter of 2020, a massive increase in fraudulent attempts. It coincides actually with the end of COVID and basically coming out of the sort of lockdown scenario, which is kind of counterintuitive. One would have expected, people would have been busier on this sort of stuff whilst they had nothing to do, but these are the facts. Again, in terms of the country breakdown, we can see KSA, South Africa, Pakistan, high up there, because it does, certainly in the case of KSA, coincide with their launch. Briefly, I said I'd come back to in-app. The first column, we're looking at something called app quarantine. Again, Dimitri mentioned it in terms of where an application is downloaded, and then it does whatever it has to do, but then it sleeps, and after a period of time, it spawns a child application which can, again, continue to sleep until then it's activated and it does its damage, as in attempts to bill the user. The interesting takeaway here is that you can see in 2022, same-day activation predominated, 55%. As we move into mid-2023, you can see that the period that the child app sleeps gets longer and longer. I have an example that shows where it was activated after a month. In terms of the App Store's APK combo, that's all third-party stores other than Google. But the interesting takeaway here is in 2022, you can see 30% of the APK files, before the APK files were perpetrated on the Play Store. This has come down massively, down to 3% in 2023. So Google are doing a very, very good job of cleaning out their Play Store environment. And finally, over here with the app categories, you see something called not applicable at the top. This is a concerning trend. This is where the code in the APK files that have been downloaded are encrypted, making it extremely difficult to source where the actual issue has come from and to detect the app file that is causing the problem, spawning the child apps, which lead to the attempted billing. And that's something that we're going to have to watch very carefully going forward, because as you can see, the increase from year on year is quite substantial. Okay, I don't know how I'm doing for time. About 2 minutes. Okay, I'm going to jump through these quickly. This is just an example of content locking. I mentioned it earlier, where the screen effectively gets frozen and the user can't get out unless they click a button which invariably subscribes them. This is one that we found on Instagram. I'm not going to leave it played through because we don't have time. The second type, by the way, I can make this presentation available for anyone who wishes, is an auto subscription, but specifically clickjacking. And this was a profile on Twitter where the user initially clicks and then nothing happens. An automated bot takes over and takes them through to their phone being billed, and then the subsequent payment billing messages come through. So the user did nothing after one click. Third one, I mentioned the app malware. This is an example where a normal app was downloaded, and then a month later, an APK, fraudulent APK child was initiated and attempted to bill the phone. That's a month later. Okay, briefly, solutions. The industry have to take responsibility. The context is that in our value chain, these are the main players. When the user is going through his journey, the likelihood is that he is going to be hitting pages which are hosted by these individuals. But it only happens once they hit the service page. So the merchant is more than likely going to host the landing page. The aggregator is more than likely going to host the payment mechanic, the order, as we call it, the first step to request the billing. And the carrier will be hosting the payment page. So therefore, it behoves these individual players to own their space, to take responsibility by way of, regular penetration testing, et cetera, to stop any fraudulent activity on their pages, which they generally do. Added to that, there are many anti-fraud solutions, one of which we supply, where you can put the necessary JavaScript on these pages and be informed in real time the players that there's a fraud attack or a particular traffic that's coming through is fraudulent. The problem is you can't do this easily in the ad channel from the banner through to the landing page because there's myriad partners, channels, affiliates, sub-affiliates, call it what you will. That's the challenge we've got in the advertising channel when it comes to fraud. I have a colleague, my colleague David Ashman will talk about this later. It's basically due diligence and risk control. What to do as a responsible member of the value chain to protect your own environment, but also that of the user themselves. So I won't go into too much of that. Consistency. The context here is when it comes to let's say the motivation behind the different players, the carrier who has most influence in the whole chain has mainly got reputational issues that occur due to the fraud coming through to their platform and being built on their network. So they have the biggest say. They generally push this down to the, if I go back to this, to the aggregator, who actually very little skin in the game. Their margins are tiny. They're not really responsible for much there, but have to take it seriously because they partner with the carrier, and the carrier will cut them off unless they do take responsibility. So they push you down to the merchant. Now the merchant has probably the biggest to lose. They're the ones paying for the advertising. They're paying for the content, and so therefore they're the ones that need to pay most attention to what's going on. And then finally, the advertising partner, the affiliates. It depends on the business model. If it's a CPC, by just clicking, then it's easy enough. That there's no actual requirement for an activation or a payment to go through as there is with a CPA. That's sure. And the last thing was just to say the fourth solution, as well as having an anti-fraud solution, have something like this, which effectively records from the service page right through to the payment page exactly not only what the consumer agreed to be billed, but also what they saw before they agreed to be billed. I'll leave it at that. Sorry.
Thank you, Declan. Thank you.